All right, folks. Mark here, cooking books, bringing info as usual. So, a buddy of mine said to me I should do a little sermon on my YouTube channel. So I said, all right, I'll make the attempt. I'm gonna sermonize, and this one I'm gonna call "Celebrating Before the Victory." Celebrating before the victory. So real quick, I do have a certificate of ordination. I was certified a certificate of ordination, Marlon Cole, as a pastor, right, as a minister. And this was back in 2005. I graduated from this theological seminary, Bachelor's of Arts in Theology, Marlon Cole from Jehovah Jireh Bible Accredited Bible College in Brooklyn back in 2005. So this is over 14 years ago, right? And I never really put it into use. You know, I have a strong affinity for the Bible, very passionate affinity. Uh, but so I say all that to say that I've studied. I have a very extensive cognizance of the Bible, but reading it 14 years ago and reading it today, it's like night and day, right? Because there's been a broad span of time, and with time comes uh, emotional, psychological, spiritual evolution. So an appreciation for the scriptures today will be greatly different from an appreciation from the scriptures when I was in my mid 20s or early 20s, right? So yeah, so let me go ahead and make an attempt to sermonize. So what I want to say is this, right? Uh, Celebrating before the victory. Now, I want to use two prepositions that are diametrically opposed or what's called polarized, right? We've been prepositioned. I don't want to use the word, I don't want to use the term condition. I don't want to use the term condition. We've been prepositioned. And I'm using preposition because preposition is a part of, it's a syntax of grammar. It's a structure of grammar. A preposition, we've been prepositioned to celebrate after the victory. Again, you'll see why I'm using the word. I'll tell you real quick. So I'm using preposition as opposed to conditioned or programmed because I really want to sink my teeth into what grammar does to an organism. Grammar dictates your behavior. Grammar dictates your behavior. I'll say it again. Grammar governs how you interact and how you behave. The syntax, meanings, semantics, all of that, right? Syntax is how you and I communicate. How we communicate governs how we interact and how we behave, right? So we've been prepositioned to celebrate after a victory. Case in point, easy example, very simple. You score a touchdown, you celebrate after the touchdown. You never celebrate before the touchdown. You celebrate after the touchdown, right? You celebrate after you win the Super Bowl. The fans don't cheer and scream before you win the Super Bowl. I mean, they do, but they don't celebrate till after. They're cheering you on. The fans cheer you on during the game, but they celebrate after the victory, right? Basketball, same rules, right? You celebrate after you win the finals or you win a game. Fans cheer you on depending if you're at home or away, but you typically are going to be cheered on after they're going to celebrate after the win. Race car driver, horse race, track and field. In all sports, we are prepositioned to celebrate after. Now that carries over into the rest of our lives, right? What I mean by that is this, right? We celebrate after we get the promotion. We celebrate after we get the house. We celebrate after we get the clearance from the mortgage company to get the house. We celebrate after the FICO score goes to 650, 700, the middle score. We celebrate after the stock that you bought now appreciates and you're now up 30, 40, 50%. We celebrate after the win. We celebrate after the honeymoon. We celebrate after you get married, right? After you get the wife, you get the baby, you celebrate. You celebrate after you get a new car. You celebrate after you make partner at a firm that you've been working for 5, 6 years. We've all been preposition to celebrate after. So the preposition after, two prepositions, after and before. Before is castigated. What I mean by that is this, right? If you celebrate before a win and you don't get the win, you're laughed at, you're ridiculed. And they usually say you count the eggs before they hatch, you count the chickens before they hatch. It's a famous saying. Or they'll say something, you ran a victory lap a little bit too soon, right? So you're castigated, lambasted, and ridiculed, and put in a state of derision should you celebrate before a victory. You're always taught to celebrate after the victory, not before the victory. So the three-dimensional thinking, the three-dimensional world, length, width, height, time, four-dimensional, the three-dimensional plane in which we exist, we've been prepositioned. This is all natural within its custom, right? it's customary to celebrate after the victory. This is the laws of three-dimensionality. However, you and I are multi-dimensional creatures. I'll say that again. We are multi-dimensional creatures. Multi-dimensional, many dimensions, many facets, many aspects to one being. There's one being, many assets, many aspects, many multi-dimensional, many universes, many levels, consciousness, etc. Many states of being in one corporal form. Right? So the downside to this is this: because we have this multidimensionality and we're prepositioned to function within three dimensionality, we limit our span, our bandwidth. We're limiting our span in terms of consciousness. We're only conscious to celebrate after a win. So we're prepositioned that way. So that is our we are oriented, right? That is our psychological orientation. That is our emotional orientation. That is our spiritual, mental. Why? Because we've been prepositioned from birth, from the beginning of time, to celebrate after. But not so. So now we're prepositioned towards God. We're prepositioned towards God. We want to praise God. We want to celebrate God after He gives us a victory. We want to celebrate God after He gives you the job. We want to celebrate God after He puts you in, brings you through the surgery and you come out healthy on the other side. You want to celebrate God after He brings you into greener pastures. You want to celebrate God after you have planted the seed, the harvest, and now you have a basket full of fruit. You want to celebrate God after, everything is after, right? So we're prepositioned towards God because we're prepositioned for after, right? That is our orientation. That is direction. That is the trajectory in which we've been prepositioned. After. But with God, not so. With God, it's before. See, with God, it has to be the opposite of the world's way. The world preposition us for after, right? Society prepositions us for after. God prepositions us for before. You see what I'm saying? God prepositioned us from the perspective of before. Before is not castigated, it's actually highlighted, right? When dealing with spirituality, when dealing with God, we're prepositioned from before. What I mean by that? In the book of Matthew, it says, when you pray, believe the things you say and you shall have them. That look, believe the things you're let me translate it to simple English. When you're praying, when you're asking God for something, believe that you have it already and you shall have them. You see the difference? Not after you get them, then you should, when you pray, don't wait till after you get them to give God thanks. In other words, believe the things you're asking for. Believe that you already have them, and you shall have them. So you have to believe before. This is before, preposition before. Before you get those things, you have to believe that you already have those things. I'll say it again. I'm translating this, right, to very mundane, very easy to understand English. When you're praying to God in the book of Matthew, Jesus says, when you pray, believe the things you say, and you shall have them, and you shall have them. You have to believe you have them already. So this is before. So before you get the job, you have to believe you have the job. Before you get the wife, you have to believe you have the wife. Before you get the wife, you have to be a husband, right? Before you become a wife, before you get the husband, you have to believe you're. Before you get the husband, you have to be a wife. Before you become a husband, before you get the wife, you have to be a husband. I'll say it again slowly. Before you get the husband, you have to be a wife. Before you get the wife, you have to be a husband. Before you get the job, before you get the job, you have to celebrate the job before you get the job. Celebrate the promotion before you get the promotion. Celebrate the clear to close from the bank before you get the clear to close. Celebrate the victory before you get the victory. Celebrate the touchdown before you get the touchdown. Celebrate the basketball championship before you get the championship. Celebrate the NASCAR win before you get the win. Celebrate the track and field race before you run the race. With God, we celebrate before the victory. You can't say, God, okay, after you give me this, then I'll praise you. After you give me this, then I'll celebrate you. We could do that with football, basketball, and three-dimensional thinking. But when we're talking about the multi-universe, when we're talking about God consciousness, we celebrate before we get our victory. We celebrate before we get our wins. Because in the other realms, it's the laws that governs three-dimensionality is null and void in terms of multi-dimensionality. I'll say that again. The laws that govern three-dimensionality in which we exist is null and void in multidimensionality. Multidimensionality operates and functions outside of the laws that governs our three-dimensional selves. So We have to praise and give God thanks before we get the victory. We have to be thankful before the doctor give us a clean bill of health. We got to go in with a praise on our lips. Thank you. We have to be celebrating before we get the clean bill of health. We have to celebrate before we get our finances in order. We have to celebrate before we get our credit score up. We have to celebrate before the stocks go up that you just bought. You have to celebrate before equity gets into the house and you can take that equity and buy another house. You have to celebrate before you manifest the things that you're desiring. You have to celebrate before, not after, but before. Not the grammar that is confined and limited to this realm. You have to think outside of that box, outside of that bandwidth, and understand the power. There's a power. There's a power being activated when you celebrate before you get the victory. Because when you're celebrating before you get the victory in the spirit realm, right, in the invisible realm, what you're actually doing is you are activating all of the constituent parts, all of the moving parts, right? Before you can buy a house, let me give you an example. Before you can buy the house, right? Uh, let's talk about it in the physical realm. Before you buy the house, you have to find, first things first, you have to have the finances, right? So you have to have the credit scores got to be good, right? If your credit scores got to be good, that means all three rating agencies, you have to make sure you're in contact or constant communication with them to make sure that they're reporting everything right and accurate, so on and so forth, right? Then you have to have the mortgage broker, right? You have to make sure you have to have a real estate agent, right? You have to find sellers, right? You have to find a location in which you're comfortable, right? You have to make sure that the zoning and schooling and all of those things are important as well, right? You have to make sure that you have an attorney, right? So what I just gave you was all the moving parts. These are like the working parts, the mechanisms that lead to finally you get the house. Say that to say this. When you start praising before you get the house, when you start praising before you get the promotion, when you start praising before you get the job, when you start praising before your stocks go up, before your stocks go up, before you get the job, before you get the promotion, before you get the wife, before you get the car, before you get the house, they, each individual thing that we just discussed, the house, the car, the promotion, the job, each individual entity on its own has a myriad, a plethora, a number of working parts that's going to make them manifest. So again, easy example, promotion to make partner at your law firm. There is a series of working parts that have to be in motion for you to make partner. There's several things, a plethora of things that has to happen for you to make partner. When you start praising, right? Before you get the victory of making partner, what you're doing in the invisible realm, in the spirit realm, is you are activating all those moving parts. You are expediting, you are speeding up, you are giving force, motion to all those parts, all the things that's necessary, your credit score, your real estate agent, the location of the house, the sellers, the buyers, the lawyers, all those individual parts. What you're doing when you're praising before, not after, but before, you're starting to set all those things into motion. You're setting all those things into motion. This is how the laws in the ethereal or the astral realm, right? The heavenly heavens. This is the laws that operates in those realms. Just like how we have gravity in this realm, the laws of electricity in this realm, right? The laws of motion in this realm. There are laws in the ethereal or the astral realm. And when you're praising, right, you're giving praise before, not after, as we're prepositioned to, but when you're prepositioned to praise before, you what you're doing is, like I said, you're activating powers. You're releasing, you're putting into transition, motion, the parts that's necessary to bring about the home, to bring about the car, to bring about the promotion, to bring about your stocks going up, to bring about, there's so many parts, things that have to occur for this to occur. There's so many things that has to occur first before this can occur. And what you're doing is you're activating those things when you start praising before the manifestation. before the touchdown, like I said, before the field goal, before the NBA finals. So again, we have to praise God before. And it's vitally important that we understand this. There can be no progress without pain, folks. There can be no progress. No progress can be made without pain. Research history, any revolution, any revolutionary change that has ever been brought by, has ever been brought about throughout history, always is preceded by some discomfort, some pain, some turbulence, some trouble, some tough times. There must be some uncomfortableness that you and I must endure in order to attain comfort. There, we must go through some hell in order to get to heaven. There can be no freedom without going through the prison. There must be some prison that we have to go through to get to freedom. There can be, I'll say this, stored in the hippocampus. The hippocampus, what's a good analogy? A USB for your computer. The hippocampus in the brain is the USB, is what the USB is to the computer. It stores long-term information. So the past hurts, your past pains, your divorces, your failed relationships, your psychological abuses, your child abuse state, your rape, your molestation, your drug addict, you growing up in a home of drug addicts, and everything we've experienced, every emotional trauma, shock, has been stored away in the hippocampus, and we carry it around with us as a luggage, as a baggage, emotional baggage, and it governs your behavior. It governs your perspective on the world. It creates and shapes your paradigm, how you see the world and how you interact with the world and how you behave and how you respond to stimuli. So this is important. We must understand that in order for us to change the pain of our past, we must face the pain of our present. The pain of your present forces you to bring to surface the pain of your past. It rises to the top like cream. The cream rises to the top. The pain of your past, the pain of your present will force you to bring to surface the pain of your past. And the pain of when the pain of your past can come to the surface and the pain of your present can meet at a table of negotiation. And at that table we can decide and we can discuss and we can negotiate. Then we can have what's called a cathartic moment, a catharsis or cathartic moment, which is a purging, a relinquishing, a releasing of negative energy. And only then can we walk in the freedom of our true selves. So every pain that comes into your life has a purpose, but there can be no progress without pain. And we must bring our past pains into our present pains and have them meet so we can have what's called an atonement, which is reconciliation, reconcile, a reconcilement. So we cannot wait. I digress a little bit, but we cannot wait to get the greener pastures before we praise God. We have to praise in the we have to praise while we're in the what we call parched places, right? We have to praise while we're in the infertile state. We have to pray when the soil there is no fertility in the soil. We have to pray when we're standing on fallow grounds. We have to pray when we're building on fallow grounds. We have to pray when there is no harvest. We have to pray when the locust has eaten up all of our grains, and we have to praise when the bills have consumed your check. You got a check in one hand, it disappeared by the other hand, right? You got one check in this hand, you just got your check, and the minute you get the check, it's gone out. It comes in one way and goes out the other. You have to praise nonetheless. You have to praise when you're deficient, right? When there's a deficit. Right? When you're running a deficit, don't wait for a surplus. Remember, praise before the victory. Praise before the win. Celebrate before the win.